You're listening to Rolling Recklessly, the podcast where dice hit the floor, paint gets spilled, and no game ever goes exactly as planned. I'm Grizzly, and here we dive headfirst into Warhammer, tabletop gaming, and the beautiful mess that is the hobby life. From epic crits to absolute disasters, we'll cover it all. So grab your minis, roll with me, and let's get reckless. Welcome back to Rolling Recklessly, the podcast where we dive headfirst into all things Warhammer Age of Sigmar, from epic lore of the mortal realms to the armies we collect, paint, and push across the tabletop. I'm your host Robert, aka Grizzly, and we're in for a long one today. Today we're tackling one of the most important milestones for any player, building your very first 1,000 point army. Now if you're brand new, 1,000 points is that sweet spot between the fast, smaller Spearhead games and the massive 2,000 point battles most tournaments are built around. It's the scale where you learn your army, test your strategies, and it starts to feel like you're commanding something substantial without drowning in too many units or rules. We'll break down what makes a strong 1,000 point list, some of the common mistakes to avoid, and I'll even share a few example lists that you can use for your inspiration. Some including my own from Sylvaneth, as well as some Stormcast and maybe some Nighthaunt. Whether you're fresh off your Spearhead box or looking to take your collection to the next stage, this episode will give you the tools to roll recklessly into your first real games of Age of Sigmar. And hey, if you enjoy the show, make sure to follow us on Instagram at rolling_recklessly_podcast, where I post episode graphics, giveaways, and hobby updates. We're also starting to grow a Discord community, so if you want to share your own 1,000 point list, or just talk Age of Sigmar, that's the place to be. So grab your dice, grab your army list, and let's get started. So why is 1,000 points such an important milestone in Age of Sigmar? For me, it was the moment where my collection of Sylvaneth stopped being just models on a shelf and started feeling like a true army. Spearhead was fun. It taught me the basics, gave me some fast games, and let me experiment, but once you hit the 1,000 point mark, the game completely opens up. Suddenly my heroes mattered more, my units had to work together, and my choices during the game actually felt like strategy as opposed to just randomly moving pieces around. Think of it like this. Spearhead is your training ground. Quick battles, smaller model counts, and a way to learn the rules without feeling too overwhelmed. But at some point, you want more. You want the full army experience, where units start to interact, heroes make a real difference, and objectives matter over multiple turns. That's exactly where 1,000 points lives. It's the bridge between fast skirmishes and the epic 2,000 point battles you'll see in big tournaments. Now, I do want to point out that something important. Age of Sigmar is really balanced around 2,000 point games. That means at 1,000 points, some armies or units might not quite feel the same as they do in a full size. A unit that feels unstoppable at 1,000 might just be one tool in the toolbox at 2,000, and the reverse is true. Some armies that rely on synergy pieces can feel weaker at this level, and that's fine. 1,000 points isn't about perfectly replicating the competitive scene. It's about learning your units, seeing how they interact, and getting comfortable with your own army's playstyle in a manageable format. I'll give you an example. In my early Spearhead games, I remember feeling like most matches came down to who rolled better dice and who could throw their units forward faster. It was fun, but it was simple. Then, when I played my first 1,000 point games with the Sylvaneth, something clicked. I wasn't just pushing Dryads across the board anymore. I was thinking about where my branch witch should stand, when to risk a teleport with my tree revenants, and how my Kurnoth hunters could swing the momentum if I timed it right. That's when I realized this isn't just about moving models, this is actually about commanding an army. At 1,000 points, you get enough models on the table to feel the drama of Age of Sigmar without the actual time commitment or the complexity of a full-sized match. Games still move quickly, usually under 2 hours, and the model count doesn't feel too overwhelming. You can really feel the tactical decisions start to matter, but you're not yet juggling the dozens of moving parts that the 2,000 points demands. 1,000 points is also the size where communities really thrive. For example, at my local game store, J&J Gaming Factory, we currently run a weekly build and paint night on Tuesdays and then open Warhammer nights on Mondays. Right now, there aren't any leagues running, but that's part of why I recently stepped up to be the Age of Sigmar ambassador. One of the first projects I've outlined is a Spearhead League that's currently pending approval, and the goal is to eventually help players grow from Spearhead entry point into full 1,000 point games, because that's where the balance of fun, time, and learning really comes together. And then there's the collection side. Hitting 1,000 points is achievable without breaking the bank or drowning in gray plastic. Most armies can get there with a single box set, a hero, and maybe one centerpiece. And that's where your painting goals start to align with your gameplay goals, and you can actually field something that feels like a real force instead of just a handful of models. For me, The first time I teleported my Kurnoth hunters onto an objective and actually won with them, it was like a light bulb moment of, oh, this is what Age of Sigmar is supposed to feel like. So, 1,000 points is more than just a number. It's the scale where your models start to feel like an army, where your community connections grow, and where your collection turns into something to be proud of, and that's why it matters. Alright, so now we've talked why 1,000 points matters, let's dig into what actually makes a good list at this level. Remember, Age of Sigmar is primarily balanced between 2,000 point games, and that means that some things might feel stronger or weaker than they do at full size, and that's okay. The goal at 1,000 isn't to have the perfect competitive list, it's to learn your army, piece by piece, and see how your units work together. So, what are the essentials? Think of it like packing for a weekend trip. You don't need to bring your whole wardrobe, but you do need to bring your basics. First up, we have heroes. At 1,000 points, you'll usually only bring 1 or 2, but they need to earn their keep. A good general should either buff your army, cast key spells, or provide utility. In my Sylvaneth, I often lean on my branch witch. She's cheap, but she gives me magical support and helps me cast my trees. For Stormcast, a Knight Relictor is great. He opens up your spell lores and debuffs opponents' wards. After that, you have your battleline units. These are your bread and butter. At 1,000 points, you'll almost always run 2 or 3 of them. They hold objectives, screen your heroes, and let your hammer units do their work. My Sylvaneth Dryads aren't flashy, but they can hold the line and buy my Kurnoth Hunter some time they need to hit hard. For Stormcast, Liberators and Vindicators kind of do the same job. They're tough enough to sit on objectives and stubborn enough to make your opponent not want to deal with them. Then, you have your damage dealer, your hammer. This is your unit that actually puts out pressure on your opponent. For Sylvaneth, my Kurnoth Hunters with Great Swords are an obvious choice. They hit hard, they're resilient, and they've won me more games than any other unit. For Stormcast, this role might be filled by a reinforced unit of Annihilators or a reinforced unit of Reclusions. For Nighthaunt, this might be your Bladegeist Revenants cutting through screens. The important part is having one unit that can swing the momentum your way. Without it, you'll always feel like you're on your back foot. Finally, you want at least one utility or flexible unit, something that gives you some options. For me, that's my Tree Revenants. They're not amazing fighters, but their teleportability has stolen me many games by grabbing late objectives when an opponent leaves one uncovered. For Nighthaunt, Hex Wraiths can dart across a table and do the same thing. These units teach you the importance of timing, positioning, and forcing your opponent to respond to threats in multiple places at once. Putting it all together. So if we put this into a mini example, my Sylvaneth 1,000 point list might look like this. A Branch Witch is my hero, 2 units of Dryads as battleline, Kurnoth Hunters as my hammer, and Tree Remnants for my utility role. That covers all 4 bases: leadership, the foundations, damage, and flexibility. Simple, but effective. For Stormcast, a Knight Incanter could lead the force, supported by Liberators, Vindicators as battleline, and backed up by a unit of Storm Drake Guard for the hammer, and maybe just some Prosecutors or Aether Wings to give mobility. Again, same framework, just expressed in their style. And for Nighthaunt, a Guardian of Souls for your hero, 2 blocks of Chain Rasps, and a battleline of Grimghast Reapers for the hammer, and Hex Wraiths for mobility. Same idea, different army. So, to sum it up, a solid 1,000 point list usually has 1 or 2 useful heroes, 2 or 3 dependable battleline units, 1 hammer that can actually win fights, and 1 flexible unit that gives you options. If you cover these 4 bases, you'll find your games are smoother, and you'll learn far more about your army and how it really plays. And don't worry about making everything perfect right away. At this level, you're not chasing every synergy that your army can pull off, you're building the fundamentals. The goal is to learn what each piece does, how they work together, and how to win games with a simple plan. Once you've mastered that at 1,000 points, adding more models and more layers to 2,000s will feel natural. Alright, let's put all of this into practice, and look at some example 1,000 point lists. Remember, these aren't meant to be top tier competitive builds, but teaching tools. The goal is to cover the basics, help you learn your army, and give you a clear plan when you hit the table. So for my first list, I have some Sylvaneth. I have a Branch Witch at 110 points, 2 units of Dryads at 180 points, 6 Kurnoth Hunters with Great Swords at 420 points, a unit of Tree Revenants, and a Warsong Revenant. This list has everything a beginner needs to learn the Sylvaneth playstyle. The Branch Witch is your cheap wizard who will not only provide magical support, but also unlocks Dryads as a battleline. The Warsong Revenant adds second layer of magical presence and can dish out some serious damage, especially when the dice spike in your favor. Together, these 2 heroes teach you how to use the Sylvaneth magic both defensively and offensively, as well as how to balance cheap utility heroes and more powerful centerpiece casters. The Dryads are your anvil and your objective holders. They aren't winning fights, but they're surprisingly sticky, especially in terrain, and they teach you how to stall your opponent. and how to win games through objectives instead of kills. Learning how to provide a screen properly with Dryads is fundamental to all Sylvaneth. That'll be especially important in 2,000-point games. The reinforced unit of Kurnoth Hunters with Greatswords is your hammer. This unit hits incredibly hard and has staying power, and it demands that your opponent answer it. At 1,000 points, it's an intimidating block that can single-handedly swing combats in your favor. This teaches you threat management, learning when to commit your biggest unit, and how to protect it until the right moment. The Tree Revenants are your utility unit. They won't win fights, but their teleport makes them one of the most useful of the 5-model squad in the entire game. They teach you about board control, late-game objective play, and how to force your opponents to respect even your smallest units. Put that together, and this list forces you to think about positioning, timing, and flexibility. Do you use your Dryads to hold the middle and stall, while your Kurnoths set up a hammer stick below? Do you keep your Revenants back to steal a late objective, or throw them forward early to distract your opponent? Do you risk your Warsong Revenant offensively, or keep him safe and control the magic phase? What this list teaches you is the essence of Sylvaneth: patient play, mobility, and precise strikes. It rewards careful planning, and it punishes sloppy positioning. It helps you master one of the most technical factions in the game, and when you scale up to 2,000 points, everything you learned here, from screening with Dryads to striking with Kurnoths, will still apply, just with more toys on the board. Next up, we have our Nurgle example. This list consists of the Lord of Blights, 140 points, Spoilbox Scrivener, 80 points, 10 Putrid Blight Kings for 380 points, 20 Plague Bearers for 280 points, and a Beast of Nurgle for 120 points. This list is pure Nurgle. Tough, grindy, and unrelenting. It doesn't win by flashy plays or massive damage spikes. Instead, it teaches you the art of outlasting your opponent, wearing them down while you sit on objectives and force them to fight on your terms. The Lord of Blights is your backbone hero. At this level, he's tough, cheap, and brings a strong buff for your infantry, especially your Blight Kings. He teaches you how to get most out of the durable, straightforward hero, one who makes your units better rather than trying to win the game himself. The Spoilbox Scrivener is deceptively powerful. He turns your Plague Bearers from a tar pit into a tar pit that fights back with something that actually matters. His buffs stack well with the army's natural resilience, teaching you how to make even your weakest units stickier and more dangerous. Together, your two heroes teach the fundamental Nurgle lesson. Layer your buffs and turn basic infantry into nightmares. Your battle line is carried by a reinforced unit of Plague Bearers. 20 of them is a lot to chew through at 1,000 points. You're not going to cut down enemies quickly, but they will sit on objective all game and frustrate your opponent. Playing with them teaches you patience and the importance of holding space. They aren't about killing, they're about winning through positioning. The Blight Kings are your hammer, though in classic natural fashion, they're also an anvil. 10 of them is a brick to throw at opponents. Buckets of dice steadily wear down anything it touches. At this size, they can dominate games if you use them correctly. When they teach you how to apply steady pressure, not in one explosive moment, but by forcing your opponent to deal with them while the rest of your army does its work. Finally, we have the Beast of Nurgle, your utility piece. It's quick for Nurgle, sticky, and can bounce around objectives or tie up enemy units that are deeply annoying. It teaches you how to leverage nuisance units and to pull your opponent's attention, resources away from their main force. This list teaches you the core of Nurgle playstyle. Win with the war of attrition. You'll learn how to grind down your opponents, use buffs to make your infantry much more than they look on paper, and force your opponents to fight battles they don't want to. And the lesson carries forward perfectly into 2,000 points, where you'll simply add more tar pit units, more Blight Kings, and maybe a great unclean one to amplify the same strategy. After that, we have our Gloomspite Gitz example. This list consists of a Loon Boss on Mangler Squig for 170 points, a Loon King, 200 points, 10 Boygrots Bounders for 220 points, 2 Squig Herds for 200 points, 5 more Boygrot Bounders for 110 points, and another Squig Herd for 100 points. This list is the definition of Squig Chaos. It's fast, hard-hitting, and unpredictable. But that's exactly what makes it such a great teaching tool for Gitz. You're not winning by sitting on objectives and grinding. You're winning by crashing into your opponent before they're ready, spreading pressure across the board, and forcing them to react to multiple Squig-shaped problems at once. The Loon Boss on Mangler Squig is your wrecking ball. At this level, he's one of the scariest models that you can drop on the table. He's fast, hits like a truck, and forces your opponent to either deal with him immediately or risk losing their key units. Running him teaches you risk management, when to throw him in and when to hold him back. If you commit too early, he might get bogged down. If you wait too long, you may miss your chance to swing the game. The Loon King provides leadership and buffs, making all your squig units more effective. He is also a capable fighter in his own right, but his real lesson is going to be about synergy. With him on the board, your squigs hit harder, stay scarier. It teaches you how to position your buff heroes to maximize their impact without leaving them exposed. Your hammers are the Boingrot's bounders. The reinforced unit of 10 is a big punch. When they get their charge off, they can flatten almost anything at this point's level. The smaller unit, the 5, provides flexibility. They're not as devastating, but they're perfect for hitting flanks, hunting small units, or contesting objectives. Playing with both units teaches you how to scale threats and how to use cavalry to exploit openings in your opponent's lines. The squig cards are your battle line, and they embody the Gitz playstyle. They're cheap, fast, and hit surprisingly hard for their cost, but they're unpredictable. Sometimes they'll roll hot and surprise you. Other times, they'll bounce and leave you laughing in disbelief. They teach you how to deal with randomness, how to position well so even a low roll still contributes, and how to capitalize when the dice spikes. The reinforced herd of 12 is your mainline support, while the smaller herd is great for grabbing objectives and creating pressure with multiple spots. What this list teaches you is that speed and pressure win games. Gitz don't rely on careful attrition or perfect efficiency. They rely on creating chaos, forcing your opponents into uncomfortable decisions and overwhelming them with threats that they can't answer all at once. It also teaches you how to manage squig randomness and how to use it to your advantage. Sometimes the squigs will underperform, and you'll need to find another angle. Other times, they'll spike and carry you. Learning to adapt to that swingy playstyle is the essence of Gitz. Scaling up to 2,000 points, you add even more squigs, manglers, herds, or even more bounders. And maybe a support hero like the Fungoid Cave Shaman for extra points and spells. But for the fundamentals, they stay the same. Play fast, hit hard, and keep your opponent on the back foot. And last but not least, we have the Soulblight Gravelords example. This list consists of a Vampire Lord, 140 points, Radikar the Wolf, 130 points, Blood Knights Reinforced, 220 points, 2 units of Barrow Guard for 300 points, the Kosagi Night Guard for 110 points, and then 10 Death Rattle Skeletons for 90 points. This list captures the identity of the Soulblight Gravelords: synergy, recursion, and relentless pressure. It's balanced, thematic, and packed with lessons that carry forward as you grow into larger games. The Vampire Lord gives you cheap magical support, healing, and a command ability that boosts your infantry's melee power. He's not a frontline fighter, but he teaches you how to leverage your support heroes to make the rest of your army more dangerous. Radikar the Wolf, on the other hand, is a frontline powerhouse. Paired with his Kosagi Night Guard, he can crash into enemy lines and swing combat in your favor. Playing Radikar teaches you how to combine a hero with a bonded unit, learning the value of synergy and careful positioning. The Barrow Guard are your reliable damage dealers. 2 units of 10 means that you can split them across the board and combine them for concentrated pressure. They're not the fastest, but with buffs, they become efficient killers. Blood Knights are your hammer units. Fast, resilient cavalry that can deliver crushing charges. They teach you how to time your strikes and punish overextension. Finally, we have the Death Rattle Skeletons. They're your cheap Tarpet unit. They won't win fights on their own, but they give cheap screens and objective holders. They combine with Soulblight's recursion mechanic, and they teach you the unique Gravelords playstyle of grinding opponents down over time while your elite units do the real killing. Altogether, this list teaches you how to balance elite hammers with expendable bodies, how to rely on your hero unit synergy, and how to use recursion to outlast your opponents. It's not about quick wins. It's about managing threats, timing your strikes, and steadily overwhelming your opponents with pressure they can't escape. So there you have it. 4 1,000 point list, 1 from each Grand Alliance. Sylvaneth show you the importance of positioning and mobility. Nurgle teaches you resilience and attrition. Gloomspite Gitz bring you speed and chaotic pressure. And Soulblight Gravelords drive home the power of synergy and recursion. Different armies, different playstyles, but the framework stays the same. 1 or 2 key heroes, solid battle line, a hammer unit, and a flexible piece to keep your opponents guessing. If you can master those basics at 1,000 points, you'll be more than ready to scale up for 2,000. And no matter what army you choose, the lesson you learn in this level will carry you forward into every bigger game that you play. And that's why 1,000 points is such a powerful teaching tool in Age of Sigmar. So, you've built your first 1,000 point list, you played a few games, and you're starting to feel comfortable with your army. What's next? The next natural step forward is growing into 2,000 point games, which is where Age of Sigmar is primarily balanced and where most tournaments are played. But the good news is, you don't have to throw out what you've already built. You just can build on top of it. One of the best things about 1,000 points is that it teaches you all the fundamentals. who your reliable heroes are, which battleline units feel solid, and which hammers you enjoy using. When you scale up, you're not reinventing your army. You're doubling down on things you've already learned. For Sylvaneth, that might mean adding a Lariel or Tree Lord Ancient alongside your existing Kurnoths or Dryads. For Nurgle, it might mean bringing in a Great and Clean One or more Blight Kings to expand your grindy core. Gitz add another Mangler Squid, maybe some Bounders, double down on speed and pressure. Soulblight could bring in a Vampire Lord on a Zombie Dragon, or even bigger blocks of Skeletons. Maybe even some Graveguard to amplify what's already working. Another thing you'll find is that in the lessons you've learned at 1,000 points translate directly into 2,000. Screening with cheap units, managing your hammers, keeping the heroes safe but effective, using mobility and utility to steal objectives, all of that carries over. The only difference is that now you're juggling more moving parts, which just makes those fundamentals even more important. And then don't forget the hobby side. Going from 1,000 to 2,000 points is a perfect painting goal. You can set milestones. Finish your core 1,000, then reward yourself by painting a centerpiece model like a monster or a big hero. That way, your collection grows alongside your gameplay skills. So, think that 1,000 points as your foundation. Once you've played enough games, know what works for you, scaling up becomes less about what do I buy next, and more about what do I want my army story to be at full size. And that's one of the most exciting parts of the hobby, watching your little force grow into a true army as in the mortal realms. This has been a long one, and thanks for sticking through with me if you've listened to the whole episode. That's going to wrap things up for today on Rolling Recklessly. We talked about why 1,000 points is such an important milestone, what goes into a strong list, and some of the most common pitfalls to avoid. And I shared some example lists of all 4 Grand Alliances just to give you a starting point no matter what. Now I want to hear from you. What does your first 1,000 point list look like? Do you play it safe with durable units? Or do you roll the dice with a big hammer piece? Share your list with me on Instagram at rolling_recklessly_podcast. Or come join the Discord community where we're starting to grow space for list building, hobby updates, and the Age of Sigmar chat. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow the podcast on Spotify and YouTube, and leave a rating or review. It really helps get the word out and grow our little corner of the hobby. In the next episode, we'll be diving into the Soul Wars, one of the most pivotal story arcs in all of Age of Sigmar. We'll talk about how Nagash unleashes his great Necroquake, how Death rose to challenge the other great alliances, and how this single event reshaped the mortal realms. If you ever wondered why the Soul Wars mattered so much, you won't want to miss it. Until next time, may your crits be high, your paint never dry, and your rolls ever reckless.